So next up, we're going to have a real discussion around cloud and AI governance. We're going to do a reality check, and then we're going to talk about the road ahead. And what better to do it with three practitioners who are actually doing it. For each practitioner, I would like to introduce them. They'll talk about where they work and a short fun fact about them. And then they're also going to talk about a possible AI horror story in the cloud. So first up, Victoria, if you can introduce yourself.
Hello, so my name is Victoria Levy and I work at SailPoint. I recently moved to SailPoint. I was at Alteryx before, so I've been here about a month now. Let's see. So a fun fact about me, I have a cat, Pepper. She walked away now, but she was here 2 seconds ago. So yeah, she likes to walk up on my desk a lot. So, and then from the AI horror story perspective, so one thing that I've heard from multiple different people is that sometimes when you let's say you're using Claude, you give it your code and you ask a prompt to add a new feature or something to it. It doesn't always have the context to know to keep all the previous stuff that you have in there. And so sometimes it makes changes to the whole thing. And if you aren't looking carefully and you deploy that, it could lead to permissions getting removed and vulnerabilities and even higher cost if it's making the same request over and over. And so yeah, there's just things that could be added in there that lead to higher risk that it would be great to be able to govern as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Lindbergh, Brent, up next.
Hi, Brent Eubanks. I'm the FinOps architect at Wayfair. Uh, Fun fact, I born and raised in Southern California, so I love the beach, playing golf, and going to the desert riding razors and dirt bikes. AI horror story kind of repeated recently, along with the one that I had last year, which is a little bit lack of timeliness. Even though we had anomaly reporting, we caught some very large 5 to 10x daily spikes on AI consumption. One of them, it was planned. It was just 3 months earlier than anyone expected. And then the other one, just recently last weekend, someone switched a reasoning model on and didn't realize it until a couple days later. So burned through a lot of money really quickly at scale. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Lindbergh, up next.
Hey, thanks, Amir. Hi, my name is Lindbergh Matillano. I'm the director of cost optimization at Avalara. My team manages the Cloud FinOps program as well as the software asset management program for a technology group. Fun fact about me, I'm from the tiny island of Guam, which is in the South Pacific. So any opportunity for me to travel is always a great one. I love the tropical weather. AI horror stories. It's fun. It just it's a repeat of the cloud horror stories, right? They're, and I see it in the news all the time. I think, someone accidentally left something on and now you have multi-$100,000 bill just looming around that now you have to pay for. And just because someone forgot essentially to turn off the lights. And I think FinOps is a great opportunity for us to apply the same principles to AI. So I'm glad to be on this panel with Victoria and Brent.
Great, thank you so much. Before we start, I think it's a great way if folks who are on the call, they want to share their AI horror story, they have to name companies. That'll be great to collect those in the chat window. But moving to the panel, Lindbergh, since I have you, I'll have you first. When AI workloads hit your clouds like GPUs, training jobs, all those endpoints, foundation models in the cloud, how does our existing governance frameworks need to change? And where do they handle it and where do they break it down? What's your recommendation?
I think the main area where it actually people get caught up is there's no governance or no policy. Particularly around AI tokenization, right? I think people can, simply select a model, and oftentimes people will select the most recent, the best available model when you don't necessarily need it. And creating a policy and enabling and communicating that policy to your engineers and say, hey, don't use the latest and greatest, use what you need. is important.
Great. Yeah. I think I hear it all the time that AI is too expensive and you need policies proactively before and just go beyond visibility. Brent, would you add anything?
Yeah. So, AI is expensive, and we've already been able to lock down like non-approved providers, open source APIs. So that's just from a lockdown access of disallowed things. We have cost visibility, cost spike anomaly reporting and alerting. We do have some smart and semantic routing. And so that helps the engineers kind of pick the most like highest intelligence that you need to do that job. And we have an internal Watchtower product that has internal benchmarks of the models so that it's not just a standardized benchmark, it's against our standardized tests. So we can check for drift or new model comparison. So it helps them improve their model selection as well.
Great. Seems like, again, a proactive approach. Victoria?
For me, I view it as similar to SaaS for FinOps. So how we start looking at the consumption-based software that's out there and adding tagging and allocation and governance and stuff to that. It's kind of the same thing. And I think we're kind of lucky that it's all still new and people are using new tools every day because there aren't some of those bad habits ingrained where if we go and start adding governance, people aren't going to necessarily push back as hard because it's still so new. And so we could do that from the start and build those good habits. And hopefully with that, we don't ever have to go back and rework any of that. So
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thinking that you said people don't have the bad habits with AI yet. And because AI is expensive, like Lindbergh and Brent said, like governance becomes paramount. So Victoria, how do you build the case for governance? Like, why is it so foundational? How do you make it not an afterthought? And what makes it actually stick?
yeah, I think because it can be so expensive, it's kind of like the same story with the cloud where engineers are empowered to now spend all of this money without prior approval beforehand. And so I think it goes back to kind of the business case for it. So what does the business actually want to get out of this? Can we quantify that? And then use that to put some guardrails there. So whether that's like a budget or a quota, or saying that people who need this tool, so maybe Claude for coding, but not necessarily for people just like asking questions or something like that. So being more specific around what you want to get out of the tools and then putting those guardrails there to achieve that.
And especially AI in the cloud infrastructure as well. Like, I think you mentioned something around managing exceptions better too, right? Because there'll always be an engineering team that like, hey, that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like I mentioned, maybe we don't get as much pushback because the bad habits aren't ingrained, but they're still kind of there. So we want to get it before it becomes a bigger thing. And so yeah, there's always going to be teams who, if you put those guardrails in place, they're going to say that we have a business case to get more access, more tokens and stuff like that. And that's totally fine. If they make a business case for it and the business approves it, then we're making progress. We want to give it to them to achieve those outcomes. So yeah, definitely have exceptions where it's needed, because that way you have the guardrails in place, but you still have the flexibility to keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Brent, anything you would add, advice you would give?
Yeah, I remember governance is twofold. One is for the business, right? Because there's a lot of ways costs can spike with the power and scale of these agents and automations, a misconfiguration, a rogue agent, a hacked LLM injection, a looping task agent not being monitored. You can easily hit 100 grand a day in some of these bigger environments. The other one is engineer quality of life, right? So why do I have to detect that? Or we've rolled out 20 new policies in the last month. They don't know, they can't keep up. So can you help me be adhering to best practices or new policies? Can I auto remediate things? I don't need to click 1,200 disallowed disks, unattached disks or things. So it's really about both top-down business governance and then engineer quality of life improvements. We can help with both.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's a good point that you mentioned. Like, it's AI is making governance change, but at the same time, AI is helping governance too, right? Like, maybe the developer does not have to do that much work. But it seems like there's always, Lindbergh, you always talk about how do you balance between, especially these days, experimentation with AI and engineers and business leaders pressurizing to get applications out the door, and at the same time making sure your budgets don't burn or or things like, or bad habits don't get ingrained, right? So how do you balance that, Lindbergh?
Ultimately becomes, it's a mixture of, looking back to the principles around FinOps and SaaS. It's one is we need to inform our users. Our users want to make the right decisions. They just don't necessarily know the decisions they're making have an impact. So it's important to inform them, and then couple that really with policy, because ultimately you're managing human behavior, right? I think people have a certain goal in mind, right? And they either it's generate a lot of code, generate deliver number of changes per month, and that's what they're focused on, which is is a good goal in certain respects. It's just important that we inform them that the impact of their decisions. Ideally, too, is really, like I said, it's human behavior. We need to educate people, right? Like, I think the biggest challenge is going to be informing people that you have a lot of choices on models. You don't have to pick the most expensive one. I think Brent, he talked about choices, right? There's so many choices, and I think even Frank mentioned there's just a lot of choices. So it's people will kind of default to the easiest if there's too many choices. So we need from a process policy standpoint, guide users to the right choice and make it easier for them, because anything we can reduce the cognitive load, I think Frank mentioned, which I love, is it makes it easier, both for us, right, from managing cost perspective, but for the engineers. And I think also we want to just make sure that we're not blockers, we're enablers, but we want to enable investment for a long term, right? We don't want to blow our budget in one token, or one query or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting that you mentioned too. I was talking to an analyst and they were saying the same thing. With AI, it's pretty much like developers are like a kid in a candy store, like so many options. They want everything. They want to touch everything. They want to play with everything, right? And that kind of leads to my next question as well. Like, how do you, and Brent, starting with you, how do you make sure that developers are using the right GPU clusters, the right models, the right settings, configurations? Traditional stuff like storage and others are even more relevant. What's your advice? Like, how do you get governance in front of developers? You briefly touched that, but if you can extend that a bit.
Yeah. So, back to Frank's like hand-drawn note of that decision tree, think of it now that a lot of those are going to help with code writing. And so we have 3 touch points. One is with the human engineer developer in their IDE tool, having a FinOps prompt that is required as part of the admin settings. There's other things we can do inside the admin settings of these IDEs. Another one is policies, where we might have, Stacklet doing a Overwatch verifier role, but GitHub Actions is actually doing the enforcement. So it's a trust but verify approach, so that as the engineer is typing in code or the agent coding copilot, it has some boundaries. So it's not suggesting a disallowed service or a very old machine. You're not allowed to have GPUs in a sandbox or a dev project, only in prod. If you want a GPU, you need to go through an exception approval, human in the loop approval check. The next point would be a pull request automation background check. So adherence to disallowed or best practices of labeling or cost overruns. So it's an automated pull request that can go into these systems and adhere to your policies and practices for that workload or scope or team or service provider. And then the last is a kind of runtime where we're making sure that the Slack bot, as things are running, it's letting folks know, but not just reporting the resource. It's trying to give a root cause of what happened, and then also provide a code snippet of this is the recommended solution. So we're trying to give our engineers as much of an AI advisory companion, so that at plan time, deploy time, and run time, we're helping the engineer and prompting it as we go through. So that's the vision. Some of it's in various states of working, but that's the vision, is to help them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're definitely spot on, and a lot of teams are trying to do the same thing. Any advice you have, Victoria, on this aspect?
Yeah, and I think what everybody else said about how we need to give engineers the information that they need about the policies because there might be a lot out there. And so I think policies are the way for us to be able to limit it. But if engineers reach a limit, they need to know why that is. And so I'm almost thinking about it instead of engineers asking prompts, maybe the tools that we build can prompt engineers to follow those best practices without them having to put in the work to figure out what that is. So.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing a theme more and more that in order for governance to work, you have to make it really, really easy for developers. It's very important in the age of AI, but it's also the lesser work they do, the more likely you are to succeed in that aspect.
Yeah.
For folks, if you have any more questions, please feel to put in the chat for the panelists. I'm going to keep going, but if you have any questions, I can take them. We can try and take them, a few of them at least in the end. But we were talking about making life easier for developers, right? And we briefly talked about how agentic AI can actually help, or AI can help with FinOps governance as well. Like now we flip the narrative a bit. How can AI help us manage govern AI in the cloud better? Lindbergh, would you start?
Yeah, I think I mean one way, and this is an interesting thing, is a lot of companies are building their own agentic AI for SDLC. And they're tying into Jira and other different products, GitLab. Um, even Stacklet has their MCP server. And I was sitting in a meeting the other day, and I'm like, what would be so cool? And I think Victoria was referencing this. What would be so cool is as part of our agentic AI piece, not only creating all of the diffs and the merges in Jira tickets, but also come in and it's like say, hey, you know what? Whatever you're creating, here's an opportunity to optimize, or switch to this certain IO type, and then do you want me to do it, right? Having that agent kind of interact with the data that's out there is would be great. And if you think about it too, from an AI token, I'm just riffing off of Victoria here because like these are some great ideas. Is when someone does that prompt, right? Like, hey, create a button for me in this application. It really, like the agent would be going, do you want me to use this model or that model, right? Or if you use this model, it'll be 50% cheaper, right? And that way the engineer doesn't even have to think about it, right? There's a lot of things agentic AI kind of unlocks. And I think as we're using them, and I'm inspired by our engineers all the time because what they do from an engineering perspective and then easily translates to how we do it in operations. I'm like, oh, wow, that'd be great for us if we can do that in the FinOps space automatically. And I try to see if we can, hop along, right along with them.
Yeah, no, great advice here. Brent, anything you want to add to summarize these thoughts? I think you briefly touched this a bit more.
Yeah, let me give a different example. So the biggest breakthrough, I think, I've been doing this for a long time, was we always had to have the engineers learn the policy tool code, and there's hundreds or thousands of policies, and they nest, and it gets complicated really fast, wide and deep, right? So the breakthrough, I think, right now is that we can have a idea spoken, say no sandbox over $500 a month. It automatically creates policy, and then it produces a list of violators. So I can get a policy spoken in a meeting, up and running, and produce the violators with an estimated monthly impact. And then from there, we can drop it into each department's repo. And now they can go in and figure out how they want to resolve it. Do they want to block it, prevent it? Do they want a human in the loop approval? Do they want to auto remediate it? So the concept of how fast anything can be spoken, and then also as a community, if we start sharing different policies, now they're portable. And so I think some of the policies that are in the open source cloud custodian community or OPA, now we have our Stacklet community, but now we can keep building these. And I think that portability of policies using our own co-pilots to do IAC continuously or IAC governance in pipelines, that's really where the engineers need to own it, right? If they want to block, detect, and auto remediate, at least we have the default foundation of hundreds of policies today. Now we've enabled them to very quickly take an idea of, well, I want it to do this way with these triggering conditions. It's very easy for them to get it going now. Before, that was always the biggest hurdle of full implementation rollout, was you're expecting the engineer to learn this Rego code or YAML and this whole new environment. And then you got all these different policy tools from all the different departments, and it's just policy tool glut. So I like the way that it's either self-enabling, nonetheless is like self-reflecting, self-learning, self-optimizing. So at night, give it a task, improve yourself, right? So now we don't even need our humans doing it. Can the agents build agents? And I think that's the real power of what we've seen in the last few months.
Yes. No, thank you so much. Victoria, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think as far as AI helping us build the governance and policies, I think from a FinOps team perspective, a lot of times we don't have like full engineering capabilities to go and write our own automation, but we know that automation is the best way to get these governance policies out there, because that way you don't have to coach people for what to do. It's just kind of already there and they're kind of blocked unless they follow it. And so I think using AI to help write some of those YAML configurations to get those policies built will help speed up what FinOps teams are able to do, but then also providing maybe a context-aware solution for remediating some of the waste that we see in the environment or how to fix a policy violation, giving that to the engineers and being able to prompt specifically for that resolution and have the code just given to them. I think that also accelerates being able to follow the policies that FinOps is trying to implement for engineers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of gold and information here. I can see multiple videos being created on this panel. So, bringing it slightly home, where does AI and cloud governance go in the next 12 to 18 months? What's get automated? What still needs a human in the loop? What is your advice generally to people? Since I have you, Victoria, I'll let you start.
For me, I think security is still a big piece. So if all of your employees have access to agents, those agents shouldn't have all of the data for the whole company. They should be based on what the user has access to. That way, yeah, they're still getting the information that they need, but not too much information. So it's still specifically in the context of what they're trying to do. And the answer might even be better because it's more focused on the solution that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brent?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece was most of us as FinOps practitioners, we're one-man bands, and we always had to go get engineering support from everybody else's teams. I think the quality of the intelligence index, it's producing code as good as maybe my contractors or level 1, level 2 engineers now. So for me, it's just been a huge unlock that we can run, a whole department, and we could have hundreds of task hand agents that are mapped to a consultant, let's say like anomaly detection or tagging or policy violations. So that 3-tier multi-agent master FinOps, I'm trying to like replicate myself so it watches very specific things and it's able to go be a digital worker. And I think that's the biggest aha moment where it's going in the next 12, 18 months is we can now scale all of the actions we want the engineers to take. And how do we enable that so that it becomes invisible, right? It's kind of everything was by them in the past. Now it's with them, and soon it will be for them, right? So as we move through that time era, you don't have to expect the engineer to do everything. And I think that's really what I'm after. And what I'm hearing is, can't you do that for me? And can you do it for me in a better way than we know they're not going to be governance experts. No engineer wants governance, right? So how can we make it invisible to get the business results, right? But give the engineer back their time to go be creative and do things, right? So we really got to have a high level of trust in these policy tools. So you got to build trust slowly with the engineers. and then eventually you'll get to that vision. And it takes time. These are, multi-year types of things, but I think that's the real path. Is we now have a digital worker that FinOps practitioners and the engineers and the platforms folks, we can start to trust and work your way in as the intelligence gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of gold. Anything that you would add, Lindbergh, like about the roadmap? Any advice you would tell to your peers right now?
I think my advice really is new technology isn't a new phenomenon, and adoption is similar across. Over the years, right? It was RPA, analytics. Now it's agentic AI, and one thing that doesn't change really is human behavior, right? And I think focusing on how you can make it easier for humans to make the right decision at the time of the decision, the better it actually is for ultimately the organization, and both in profitability, but obtaining their goals.
No, that's great. I think we made it right on time too for this, but I think there were a lot of insights for everybody. I hope the attendees, they were very active in asking questions too. I would say give a big hand applause to our 3 panelists. I personally see a lot of content from it coming out, a lot of golden nuggets. I should be seeing way more emojis. I think people are checking email or something, but yeah, now it looks better. Really appreciate Lindbergh, Victoria, and Brent for your time and all the insights.